let's start in the beginning. I read that your dad actually had an import business
Yeah.
growing up. Can you tell me a little bit about, how that may have influenced your work and then how you got into the industry yourself?
Yeah, I think it's a great starting point and definitely a huge mentor figure for me, right? And I think very privileged, like people talk about luck as an entrepreneur, and I think there is luck. A lot of the luck is what happens to you before, right? Being able to be born into a household where, my dad had originally from Israel, came from Israel to South Africa, and it was actually when my mom was pregnant with me that he got fired and he had to figure it out, and so he landed up going from working as a salesman selling laundry equipment to then starting his own company and importing laundry equipment into South Africa, and he was importing like irons and washing machines and things like that, and it's very different to food,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I got a lot of the lessons of how to run a business and was always able to ask questions, and I think entrepreneurship fascinated me from a very early age. I was always trying to sell things and start things and think about starting things. None of them were ever successful. And so, you know, don't have those great stories of by the time he was 16 had $40,000. It was by the time I was 16, I had spent all my bar mitzvah money and was and off to university. But that definitely did help. And I had loved food again from an early age, and had actually gone to culinary school after my first year of college. And then when I came to the US for grad school, just saw an opportunity. The market is so big, and never ever thought I would be able to make that pivot. I thought that opportunity would present itself more in the finance fields, where that's where I'd been. I'd been at Deloitte, I'd been in finance, and the miracle of the US market being so big, there's just a lot of money going into lots of different things. And I got a job at a meal kit company, and one thing led to another, and saw opportunity to start my own thing. And so while I was at a company called nuts.com, I made the decision that it was time to, move away from working for someone and try and do my own thing and try and start something.
Yeah. I love what you share about the first idea of yours.
Yeah.
The first entrepreneurial idea wasn't necessarily a success. Mine is the same. I don't know that I've ever shared this, but like right out of college, I thought I'm going to start a magazine. Like I was gonna, I had all of these sort of, ideas. I knew I would be an entrepreneur, but I didn't quite know what my business would be. And
Yeah.
I think similarly to you, it's as you're taking jobs that interest you, you're experiencing things,
Yeah.
you're learning things, you're sort of taking it all in. And then in my case, I sort of stumbled into it in a way.
Yeah.
I was a buyer. I focused on like local, domestic, sustainable, organic, right? Very
Yeah.
specific. I had an opportunity with a startup to start to source organic on an international level. And I thought, well, this isn't something I want to do long term, but I think knowledge of that market is something that would
Really be
benefit me.
helpful. Yeah.
So I took the job and I had given 3 weeks notice to my current employer at the time. And 1 week before I was to start, I got a phone call that said, "Have you heard the news?" And I said, "No." I was moving into this home now that I'm in. And they said, "Well, we lost our round of funding. And so you actually don't have a job here and we're going to
Oh,
be
wow.
closing down in 30 days." And so that was the start of my consulting business was I
Yeah.
had lost a job and someone happened to be reaching out to me, luck if you want to think of it that way, someone who knew that I was a buyer and specialized in sourcing, and then kind of not stumbled into, but it evolved into focusing on the finances, which was a big part of my job,
Yeah.
historically. So I think it's so important to share those types of stories with
Yeah.
people.
And I think a lot of it, because I used to talk to my dad a lot about this when, his route to entrepreneurship was out of necessity, and he, had lost his job and needed to just figure something out, and I was in a much more privileged position, right? And I acknowledge that. And I think the big thing for me was moving into industry, right? I was in like the professional services industry at Deloitte, which, had an amazing time there. And I think it gave me a lot, but, the benefit of being able to move into industry, into roles that are, a little bit different, where you're actually doing you're not advising, you're doing the work, and you're, building sourcing teams or planning and build in supply chain, gave me exposure to an industry that I was interested in. To your point, right? Find an industry that you're interested in. I was less concerned about role when I joined Plated. It was more about industry. I wanted to get exposure to industry, and once I was there, the opportunities just started coming. Like I was like, oh wow, you could do this or you could do that. They were just so, you just got exposure to a lot more, let's say arbitrage, as I like to say, right? Places where you felt like you could add value. And that's a lot harder to do when you're, in a professional services firm. And those are great jobs. And if you love that, then, you should continue doing that. But at the same time, if you're looking to try and find that idea, right, it's really hard to just sit in a room and manifest that idea. It's much easier to go into industry, then you start to see the cracks everywhere and the opportunities. So, that definitely was something that, I was frustrated about until I made that change, and then suddenly started to see opportunities present itself.
Yeah.